right, guys, welcome back to another episode in the Shack and Progress podcast. It's getting more normal for me to just get this started, but I have a good friend of mine, and I mean that dearly. I have John Maxey here. There's a lot that I could say, but I know that in this podcast you'll get to know him a bit more. But when I think of John Maxey, I think of him as the master of connecting people, which is networking, right? And we'll get into your background, John. But thanks for coming. How was the drive over here?
That was good. I feel sorry for the people behind me.
you have the BMW still?
No, I'm driving the Mach-E.
Oh, okay.
And it's, unfortunately I don't use the self-driving mode a lot, and I'm busy, so I'm texting on the phone, and it was funny.
No, you're not. Yeah. You can't say that on here.
I need to get better at it, so that's why I put it out there.
Okay.
But,
yeah, that makes sense.
I think Mike was in the car with me the other day, and he was within a quick period of time, he's like, dude, you need to stop.
I'm guilty of it too.
Yeah.
So, and I don't have self-driving.
Right.
So, well, I met John, was it 21 or 22? I think it was end of 21,
End
right?
of 21, right?
21 to 22. I was in Solar, and I'm moving to Arizona, and we'll go in my story later at another time. But he found, was it you or was it, what's his name? He was working with you side and side. Marshall, was it? I think he reached out to me first.
He may have reached out to you first, and then eventually we had a chance to chat, and
So a Solar game, that's how I met John, but it goes way past Solar. John and I have weirdly been able to stay connected over the years, maybe never really directly working with each other all the time, but we're always connected. And I pieced this all together in my mind yesterday, thinking about this podcast, that it really was you. Like, we always stayed in contact because your skill set allowed it, right? Mm-hmm. So before we dive into network marketing and your history and everything like that, I would like for us to start as the entrepreneur of the side of John Maxey, right? You're good at connecting with people, but can you take us back, John, to your entrepreneur side of things, starting your own thing? And where did that start as a child? Like, did you see things when you were a kid that made you think, okay, you know what, I'm going to end up being an entrepreneur? Or did it just happen that way?
I think there was some influence by some of my siblings. I have three older brothers and 3 older sisters. And so they kind of shaped a little bit of what I did when I was a kid. And I remember also being in an environment that was financially not good, right? So I think the first entrepreneurial thing I ever did was flipping my lunch money, right? So
what do you mean flipping your lunch money?
Buying, I remember buying little packs of gum, right? And they said 25 cents on it, but it was a little bit less than, what you get, and just selling those,
okay.
To make extra money for my lunch money and stuff like that. I did have get into those door-to-door things when you're a kid, selling cookies and some kind of dream vacation to, the Disneyland. And I remember the very first sales pitches, I'm probably 14, 15 years old, knocking on a door trying to sell candy, right? In apartment complexes, being dropped off in a van.
that takes guts to do.
It does. It's wild now to think about, some strange man carrying around 15 kids in a van, going door to door, selling, expensive candy and then, trying to win a trip that who knows if that ever happened, right? But that was my first venture into it. And then I remember, sports was my main thing. So I played a lot of sports in high school, and, I grew up in Mesa, and it's a large high school that I went to. And I remember my grandma thinking that we were going to have problems, right? My mom's Mexican, my dad's black. So being a mixed kid, they thought, oh, you're going to have issues because you're not going to know where to belong, right? Mm-hmm. And then where I went to school, Westwood was a mixture of a lot of different people, a lot of Hispanics in the community, Mexicans in the community, a lot of whites in the community that, it's a Mormon school, right? So you would think, how are you going to fit in? And the exact opposite happened, right? Me and my younger brother were popular kids in school and got along with everybody because we had to assimilate with everybody, right? Ended up being like the high school homecoming king and star athlete. And so I had a lot of confidence as a kid.
I can't find any of this on social media. That's my problem.
It's so old. I do have some pictures of, me and my homecoming king with Amy, and I still know her, right? So
That's
it's just,
crazy.
and
That's
I grew up
cool.
in a small town that a lot of people still are here, right? So every once in a while, I'll have poker parties with guys that I've known since Pop Warner. I mean, we have like 5 good friends that all hang out. All are successful in their own rights, and we play poker every once in a while. And we've known each other since we were in Pop Warner.
I see you post that
Yeah.
sometime, playing poker.
Yeah.
Them. Okay, so those are the guys.
Yeah. So while I was in high school, my first sales job was actually at a Bally's Total Fitness. Okay, so Bally's is like a LA Fitness, you know,
that, yeah.
any of the gyms out there. And I was only 17 years old. And so what had happened was I was working at Robinson's May department store, like a Broadway. Man, I'm really aging myself on this thing. But I was working at an apartment store, so I would wear a suit to work every day. And the gym happened to be across the streets where I worked out at. And I went in there one day dressed in the suit and asked if they were hiring. And it happened to be the GM that
You spoke to.
I spoke to. And so she took a liking to me and wanted to hire me, but didn't really check that I was 17.
Oh, no.
So I get hired, and then a few weeks later, she moves to the Greenway and I-17 location. And I'm in high school still. So the reason I was able to work was the last semester of high school, I only needed like a few classes to graduate. And so there were 8 hour, right? And then 2 more classes. I was done by 10.
Right.
So I'd be at work by noon, and I'd work till 8, right? Or 9, and then go home, which wasn't a problem on Longmore and Baseline because it was right down the street from my house. But then when she moved to the other location, it was a bit of a drive, right? Okay. So I didn't last very long there, but I learned a lot of, you know, I remember thinking to myself, man, I can make $3,000 just selling these gym memberships and I'll be rich, right? Because this is 20 years ago, 25 years ago. And just got the bug of sales. And my older sister had been in some direct sales businesses and whatnot. And she actually gave me my first, and you're going to laugh at this. It wasn't an audio program. It's a case of tapes. And it says
you're
how
not
to
trying to age yourself.
Yeah, I know,
it's just happening.
It's just happening. So How to Master the Art of Selling Anything by Tom Hopkins.
Oh,
and it was the tape version of it, right? So I would throw that in my car as I'm driving all the way up, you know, to Phoenix to work and really trying to hone in on my sales skills. And later got to meet him and work, you know, go to a couple seminars with him and stuff. So it was that was the beginning, you know. So I had the bug from a gym membership. Ended up while I was in college at Mesa Community College, I was still working part-time, playing football, but working part-time on the off season. And I was working at a High Health, which is another 4 or 5 years that I was there for about 4 years, full-time and then eventually part-time. And then I left to get into direct sales. Well, while I was there, that's also another place to hone in on sales skills. You know, I was taking the stuff that I was learning in these books and trying to convince the person that walked in, you know, to leave the store with a bunch of stuff for, you know, for themselves. And I also learned a ton, you know, because you're absorbing all this, you know, if customers are coming in telling you, oh, hey, this is getting rid of my joint pain. Right. Now all of a sudden I know about glucosamine and chondroitin and, you know, so like all this stuff that you learn in the health and wellness industry, for 4 years, I'm just sitting there absorbing all this stuff. Mm-hmm. And a gentleman walks in by the name of Ace Rodriguez, who's a 30-year-old millionaire that was prospecting me to come do something different, right? And I could smell out the whole pyramid thing. So I remember sitting down with him and saying, hey, I'm interested because I like the financial service side of things. It was Primerica Financial Services, and I like that part of it. And I could see myself selling because I'm listening to these tapes. But I'll tell you what, I'm never going to be doing the recruiting thing. That's just not my thing. I told him that in the first meeting, right? He's like, fine, you don't have to do that. Don't worry about it. Just come to the meeting and we'll show you the stuff, right? So I go to the meeting and, you know, I'm seeing the circles being drawn and all the, you know, the presentation. And I'm like, oh, crap, you make way more money recruiting than you do, you know, just selling, right? Yeah. And that was the only meeting I ever went to by myself. Fast forward, you know, 8 years, I was a VP with the company and had a lot of success. And I had done this in my 20s, right? I think I was 19 when I got started. I had chose to leave ASU. I had transferred to ASU, was going to play football, but it didn't work out. So I made the decision to go ahead and become an entrepreneurial full time. And so this was working at High Health, transitioning from the part-time job, creating that as a part-time job with my part-time opportunity, and then eventually leaving.
If I may, because you're going into a section already.
Right.
I want to make sure I take us back a little bit, slows down just a little bit,
Sure.
because there's a lot from that point, selling candies,
Right.
okay, to the Primerica and blowing that up,
Yeah.
right?
So
There's a
here's
lot
what
to that.
happened. When I had the foundation to have success in sales and being an entrepreneur from the things that I had gone through as a kid, but you never know where it's going to take you.
Right.
And the main challenge, I think, for a lot of people is your belief system, right? I didn't have, I mentioned the high school I went to, there was 10 black kids in the high school, right? Which means there's even less families in the neighborhood.
True.
At the time, right? It's changed now, but growing up, there wasn't a bunch of role models for me to look at that were successful, right? My dad worked at Boeing and was just he did okay, but it was, we still struggled, right? And so when I got introduced to Primerica, it was like, yeah, that's cool. Can I do this, right?
Mm-hmm.
And Ace, the guy that had recruited me into the business, said, hey, this is within a couple weeks of me joining, right? So I've gone to like 3 meetings. I've basically seen an office with maybe 100 people. I've watched some of the videos and I've seen the story, right? But I only know one guy that's successful, and it's this guy, Ace. And so my belief system wasn't very high on whether I could do it and whether it was real. But he said, I'll tell you what, we have this convention in Atlanta. And I'll tell you what, if you can get the days off from work, right? And I was the manager at the time, so I could change the schedule to make it where my 2 days off were right back to back, so that I can make this trip. He's like, I'll pay for the flight and I'll pay for your ticket there, so you don't have to worry about any of the cost. But he saw something in me, to make that investment for me to be there, right? So I'm like, sure, I'll go, right? But my flight was delayed, or not delayed, but it was a little later than everybody else. So when I flew out, you got to remember too, I'm 18, 19 years old. This is my first time leaving Arizona by myself, and let alone as for business, right? So I'm low key excited, but at the same time nervous.
Right.
And I remember I get to the airport at Sky Harbor, right? And the guy got a little red umbrella on his lapel. It's like, he must be going to that same thing I'm going to, right? And I start seeing a few people in the airport, right? I was like, I've never seen them in the office, right? So at the time, I didn't realize there was 30 other offices in Arizona.
Right.
So we fly into Atlanta, and at the airport, there's banners that says "Welcome Primerica 2017" or 20, whatever the year was, convention, right? And I was like, oh, well, kind of weird that they know we're coming. But again, I'm new to this. Like, you see that now when you go to different events,
right,
that someone's in town, right? Conventions and stuff like that.
Yep.
But again, no perspective of what I was really going to. So I get there, check into the hotel. Sorry, we're going to meet for the first meeting. Just meet in the lobby or whatever. And so I'm at the Georgia Dome, right, trying to figure out, like, is there like a little meeting area that we're going to be in, like a little convention spot? It was the Georgia Dome. Yeah. There was 55,000 people in there.
Yeah, that's
right?
The whole thing. It's huge.
And it was 3 days. And so you have speaker after speaker, right, telling their story.
Right.
And sometimes it's crazy. It's 20, 30 years ago, right? Like, you get emotional thinking about it, but that's because during that time, as I'm sitting in the nosebleeds, watching these families come across that have the most diverse backgrounds you can think of, white, black, Mexican, whatever nationality you can think of, super successful. And one of the things that I could tell as I was walking around, the company had this thing called the $100,000 Club Ring. So as you're walking in the convention with 55,000 people, you're looking down at people's hands, because if you see the ring, you know that they're a 6-figure earner, right? And at the time, that was a huge thing for me, right? So I'm just noticing a ton of people that have made it from any background. And I left there knowing that no matter what happened, it wasn't a matter of whether or not I could do it, right? It was just a matter of putting the formula together to make it happen, right? And I believe like that that helped me later when things would get tough to know that there is a way, because I saw so many other people find a way.
Right.
Yeah.
Well, let's break that down, because you at 18, 19 years old, getting on a plane, right? Only knowing really one guy, you're taking a shot. You're
Right.
literally just jumping on a plane, barely knowing somebody, and you don't know what's going to happen when you get there. What gave you the courage to take that shot? What was that thing that made you say, I'm going to jump on this plane even though I don't know what I'm doing?
It was the leader that I had at the time, Ace, was very, he was good. You know, he was everything that you wanted to see as a young man in leadership. His family first, God first, business third, right? He had two young kids that, and a wife, and he just, everything that he would talk about, right, would be exactly what you want to aspire to be. And he was in his 30s, and he was a millionaire.
Right.
But here's the thing: we would go to lunch at Taco Bell, and you know, he'd order his food, I'd order my food, and he would make comments like, "Why did you order a large?" I'm like, "What do you mean?" And he's like, "Well, it's free refills, and we're eating in." And it's like 30, 40 cents. And he's like, "Well, I thought you wanted to be rich." And this is what he's, preaching to his recruits, because his business was about making money and saving money and becoming financially independent. He would tell stories about how people didn't think he was rich because they'd go to his house, and back when he was growing up, he still had a box TV. He didn't drive a fancy car. He's like, "But look at my mutual fund statement."
That's
Right. He was teaching the rule of 72 and, compounding interest. And, it was one of those things where it's like, okay, this is somebody that's figured out how to do it. All you got to do is follow what he's doing. So then I started getting heavy into the personal development, reading the books, going to the seminars. They had Tom Hopkins do 3-day boot camps where he would teach you, how to master the art of selling. And it developed me at that age, between those times, to really hone in on it. Back then, I had slacks and dress shirts from literally most of my 20s.
So that's how you showed up, just dressing up, and I guess that's a part of the world, right? You have to present yourself.
Well, I part of it was challenging. Is like, think about a 19-year-old black kid going into someone's home,
right?
That's established, to talk about rolling over their 401k, right?
And you know what? I don't want to go too much into it, but just to bring that up, right? Because it's 2025. It's not what it used to be, right? You're facing multiple things. Your family, you grew up in some poverty, you're trying to make a name for yourself, you're trying to get somewhere. But on top of that, you have this cultural thing, right? So most people probably were more afraid to even step out and do something, right? Because they're, like you said, people are looking at you differently. You're trying to sell them something, 401ks and stuff. So why? Like, why are you different than everyone else that couldn't do it?
I will talk briefly about the dynamics of growing up as a black man, right? This is a touchy subject, but my parents, my dad's black, my mom's Mexican. They raised us as men, not black men and not Mexican, right? Wow. And what I mean by that is, there was never any talk in my household about, well, you can't do that, or you need to be careful, or this, that, and the other thing. So, if I'm because of being brought up like that, if I go to a restaurant, it's a nice restaurant. Growing up like that, I don't know I'm the only black guy in the restaurant.
Right.
Like, that's not filtered into my head.
Right.
But unfortunately, there's some other families that are raised a little different, and you're not brainwashed, but you're developed by your parents.
That's your filter. Yeah, that's your filter.
And if you go into the world thinking, well, it's going to be harder, so I didn't have that filter, but here I found myself now realizing the reality.
Yeah.
Right.
Right.
So I'm like, on one end, I didn't feel uncomfortable walking into the home.
I see.
But if they said no, right, the reality was sometimes it had to do with, hey, I'm not, going to go roll over my $401,000 account to this kid that also happens to be, not something that I would normally see doing that. Right. So that was, I think, what, when I started seeing success. I remember sitting down with my Uncle Paul, and my Uncle Paul ran McDonald's helicopter. He was an executive for Boeing. He was already a millionaire. right? And so when I sat down with him and was talking about life insurance and rolling over this stuff and that, he didn't do any business with me, but he told me, is like, if I had it to do over again, I would do what you were doing. He's like, I think you're doing, and it was just from somebody that was successful telling me, hey, you're on the right track. So that helped a lot. Ultimately, as I got better at it, right, I started getting success, right? And my team grew, and I got to that point where my contract got higher and I was getting to the VP level. And it was just a little, wasn't easy by any means, because, your best guys quit, you know what I mean? I remember one of my good friends, he was gung-ho about everything, passed his test. Very first appointment he goes on, the customer says no, and he quit. He never came back. Right?
It's not easy.
No. And this guy's successful now. He's one of the guys in the poker room.
Oh, wow.
Right?
That's awesome.
And very successful. But in that thing, it wasn't his thing. He couldn't do it. Right. And so that's the other thing. It's just like sports, right? So you learn the entrepreneurial path, right? Of, Rich Dad, Poor Dad, all that stuff. I got ingrained in that. We had game nights where it was cash flow and everybody was there. Okay. We've done vision boards with our whole team and, pulled out a bunch of magazines. And so everything you can think about, right? I remember watching The Secret with the entire team. You know what I mean? And so during that time, right, I'm doing all this personal development, trying to manifest these things in life. And Primerica was doing well, right? But I also then started dabbling into some other income opportunities. Real estate.
So just before that, I have my timeline here. Can you give us a little bit of the climax of Primerica? First off, a short snippet of what Primerica is, so that everybody understands. Sure. And then what was that climax? Like, how many people did you have? And give us some numbers too.
So, again, it took a long time to get it built, right? And Primerica is basically, at the time when I was involved, they were a network marketing company originated in A.L. Williams that basically sold term life insurance as a replacement of whole life. And Art Williams got hammered because the people hated what he does. Matter of fact, a bunch of your listeners probably don't like him.
Right. Yeah,
simply because there's more money in cash value policies. But term, he was righting a wrong. His dad had passed away, left his mom with a small amount of policy. He found out from an uncle that was an accountant that had she had the right policy, she would have had twice as much. Yeah. Got mad about that, started selling life insurance part-time while he was a school teacher, and then got a niche. White Allen Reed turned into, what Primerica is today. And he's a billionaire, right? Yeah. So but he was a billionaire that had a passion, right, of righting a wrong, right? And so that was ingrained into the Primerica story, and we were part of that. We were termites, right? We weren't just doing it to make money. We were doing it to right a wrong. Yeah. And the lack of financial education in the community. So we were out there, raising hell to try to get people to know, like, this is something that you really, really need.
You guys were passionate about it.
We were passionate about it, and I eventually left. Before I got into real estate, I actually did some other direct sales businesses, and they were good. But the one thing that I always compared it, they didn't compare to Primerica, and was those were more for making money. Like, you were passionate about the money, not about what you're actually doing for the families.
Right.
So I think that, that was easy to buy into. So that made the success a little easier to have. It took a while to get there. I finally had my own office, right? I had that VP title, right? My rolling 12, which is what gets you the ring.
Okay. Yep.
I kept missing it.
Oh no!
So if the last month you made a lot of money, it falls off the next month, then you know what I mean.
Yeah. So it's always small things.
So it was always between 50 and 100, but never quite to get the ring, right? Which is super frustrating when that's one of their milestones. And what happened was, and it's not their fault by any means, but it's part of life, right? My mentor, that was like my rock, financially was in a position where he didn't need to work anymore, right? And as passionate as he is, you're going to love this story. Me and him, when we were doing the meetings for Primerica, part of our, little thing that happened in every meeting is we'd quote movies, right? Because he was a huge movie buff, right? And one morning in the office, I came to him and I said, hey, I had this crazy dream, this crazy thing that happened. We were watching, I think it was 12 Monkeys. the movie with Brad Pitt.
Never heard that one.
It's a weird movie, but we were watching this thing and I was talking about time travel, right? And I made the comment to my mom, who's very spiritual, that this concept of time travel is like, time travel existed, right? Eventually we're going to figure it out. Well, unless Jesus comes back first.
Right. Yeah.
And so that was the seed of it, right? And so when I told him about this idea, it was more of like a movie idea, right? And it's this movie where it's What If, right? It's what the name of the movie, and it was about time travel going back to the time of Christ. The guy that figures out time travel is the Antichrist, and he's trying to disprove it, but it doesn't work out.
Cool.
And when Jesus leaves, he comes back. You know what I mean?
That's
so it was
really
a wild
cool
story.
Yeah,
so
yeah.
we got a hotel, and for 4 days we wrote
No way.
a screenplay.
No way.
We entered it into the Matt Damon, Ben Affleck screenplay contest to try to win, and we got literally like past a bunch of rounds.
Yeah.
We didn't end up winning it, but he was so passionate about writing films that he retired and went into film writing full time. That turned into a play.
No way.
Yeah.
What is this called?
It's called the play is What If, and it's a Christian play that they take around to churches, and it's the same concept of the movie just turned into a play, right? Because we were able to give it the script bought, right?
Yeah.
Literally, he had like big time producers and stuff that he got it to because he was so passionate. He had the money and resources that he turned into where he wrote a couple different screenplays, wrote a short story stuff, filmed it and all that stuff. And he really enjoyed it. But because he left, right, and I didn't have that, someone telling me kind of
The anchor.
right?
Yeah.
I started dabbling in real estate. And what happened was I ended up flipping a property that made me like 40 grand. And I was just like, what?
It's the now you got
Yeah.
the next thing, right? So you got to Primerica. If you don't mind, divulge just a little bit of what the income was like, so that we can really understand.
So
what that
7 to 8
40,000
years of struggling between 50 and 100 grand,
Mhm.
selling a dream to everybody else, right?
Mm.
And in hindsight, I had been building a residual income, but that's not really what was paying off yet. It's the advances from the commissions that from the life insurance sales,
Yeah.
and a couple big swings where I could have made a lot of money from certain rollovers that just didn't quite happen. Some good months that like your team's on fire, so you make some really good months, and that's something to be proud of when you're young like that.
Right.
But nothing consistent to ever build it. And when I was dabbling into the real estate as a VP with the securities license, Series 663, and a principal's license, I was supposed to be notifying the NASD every time I did a transaction on the real estate side. And I didn't know that. And I realized if I have to do all that for the Primerica business and I'm still not consistently making six figures, I should just do this real estate thing. And because I didn't have a mentor to tell me, hey, you can do both, just get good at filing everything like some of the VPs in Primerica do. I have a friend of mine that's in the company that he's probably makes $300,000, $400,000, $500,000 a year consistently in Primerica, but he makes way more money in real estate.
So he still has it.
He still has all the real estate, right?
Wow.
He was one of my partners that, I'll tell a story later, but we bought a house that we ended up selling to Alicia Keys. He was the principal on that house.
What the heck? The more I sit with you, the and I've known you for a while.
Right.
The more that comes out, the crazy stories. So tell us about the first house.
Uh-huh.
Okay, how did that lead source to you?
Sure.
And then that little story.
So
there.
I'm doing a refi for this lady. She happened to have two houses. And she's like, the other house I have, I don't want to refi or do anything with because it's a rental and I can't get this renter to ever pay rent on time. So I think I'm just going to sell it. And this is in the appointment, right? And this is a young entrepreneur learning all these different things. And what do you mean you're going to sell it? Wait a minute. Maybe I can refer you to a realtor, or maybe me and my partner could buy it, right? And so she said, yeah, I just want to sell. I was like, well, how much do you want for it, right? And it was one of those things where, yeah, she wanted very little for it. I think it was like she owed $55,000. She said she wanted $70,000. It was worth like $140,000. You know what I mean? So it was one of those deals. Well, $140,000 fixed up a little bit, you know. Right. And she also just didn't want to deal with the renter because she didn't want to kick him out. So she needed to sell it so that somebody else could do it. So we made an offer on it, and this was my first cash back at close too,
Okay.
because I realized I didn't have the funds to do the remodel. So I told her, I was like, we're going to buy it for what you want, 70, but the contract's going to say 90 so that I can get the 20 back. And then I'm going to turn around and flip it. And that's exactly what we did. So we ended up selling it for like 130, 140 because we were able to get the 20 grand to put it in. Right. So we made a good chunk of money. Right.
Right.
And she got out of it, didn't want to deal with it anymore. She didn't have the 20 grand to go remodel it and fix it. So it was kind of one of those things where, I mean, she could have probably got a little bit more out of it if I would have known, like, hey, but it's the first person she told me what she wanted.
Right.
And I gave her what she wanted. So,
and how did the lead get to you?
I was there to do a refi.
Okay. Got it.
It was a Primerica lead. You know what I mean?
Oh,
so
okay,
I did her
ties it
life
all together.
insurance and I was doing her refi on the mortgage.
These conversations
Yeah.
happen
Yeah.
because you're sitting there about
sitting
life.
at the kitchen table.
Yeah, it's a lot
Right.
of stuff. Yeah.
And so she's like, yeah, if you could do that. And so that was the first one we did. And then we started realizing, like, now that our credit's decent and we know a little bit about the mortgage business, we can get creative. And I started attending a weekly Tuesday mastermind, and it was a bunch of real estate people. And I was like, hey, you guys want to use my office to do the meeting? So then we started meeting at my office, right?
Man.
Which was kind of probably not compliant, but I was the VP hosting a networking group. So maybe they, kind of cross marketing, and
Right.
at least that's the story I was telling my upline why they were there. But then as I'm learning all this stuff, I'm like, dude, I was having a mental issue of selling the dream and then feeling bad. Like as I'm selling the dream, I just learned how to make 20 grand and quit. Right. And I didn't have the knowledge to understand the difference between high ticket sales that gives you large commissions,
Right.
and building residual income that's going to pay you forever. Right. And then I made the biggest mistake that I could have ever made, which was instead of just maintaining those licenses and keeping the residuals, I didn't want to do the paperwork. So I stepped down from VP to a regional, and basically gave up the licenses so that I didn't have to do it. In hindsight, that was dumb because I still got paid from Primerica for like 6 more years for the stuff that I was licensed for. And I probably would still be getting paid today had I maintained those licenses, because that's how the business works. Right. And now when I talk to high income earners that are in the same boat, one of my top sales reps in the solar game came to me one day and he's like, yeah, this is like my 5th year of like upwards of $500,000. But I realized like I cannot stop doing it and maintain my lifestyle. So I'm slave to these Zoom meetings to close these solar sales because I haven't built a team underneath that does it all by themselves. It's me.
Right. You're that guy. I put creative finance, and I just highlighted the word creative because when I think of you, you end up figuring out a creative way, quote unquote, to make solutions or to solve problems with solutions that no one's thinking about. Right. And I can tell that you're very passionate when it comes to creative finance. You get like a little tick, and you can you light up. Your eyes are big. Like you like creating these deals. So tell me why. Like, why does that really resonate with you?
So when we had those little meetings on Tuesdays at the office, I remember them. One of the things they would do on the board, they'd put on the board a big square, and they would shave off like 2%, right? And they would say that the majority of the realtors in the Valley have been educated about how real estate works, and they do the 98% way, right? Which was the traditional follow the book, nothing creative at all, right? And what they were trying to explain was what made the group special was we do this part, the 2% part. We do the cash back at close. We do the subject to financing like Pierce Morbley does, right? We do, just a creative way of financing things, right? And so maybe just the nature of me was like attracted to that creativeness that they were doing, to outside of the box thinking.
Right.
You don't want to be like the norm of everybody else. You want to be different, and this was different, right? And so that's kind of how I got started. And interestingly enough, in the mortgage industry way back then, right, there was a lot of things we could do creatively that were legal.
Right.
During the time that I was doing it and making all that money, laws were changing. Right. And so when they started cracking down on the way that we were doing things, there were some people in the industry that didn't stop doing it, right? Ended up in legal trouble. And then there was us that would say, okay, well, we can't do that way anymore. Let's find a different creative way of doing it, right? And eventually, you know, regulation kind of fixed some of the abuse that was going on in that industry. But it got up there. I mean, we had a house in Desert Mountain that a wholesaler brought me. He had picked it up for 900 grand and was willing to sell it to us for $1 million because it was appraising for 1.25.
Jeez.
We financed 1.25.
Wow.
I remember seeing, I was in my 20s and I'm looking at this check that's written to me for $250,000, right? And I'm like, how did I get into this, right? You know, and Bobby, my partner on the deal, right? We basically put a renter in it, and that 250 was supposed to cover negative cash flow because we weren't going to be able to rent it for what our mortgage was on the 1.25, but it was enough to cover us for like 2 years, right? So the goal was, hey, let's take 40 each on the 250, put the rest in the account to cover the negative cash flow. In 2 years, we'll just sell it for what we paid for. Well, the market crashed, and that home ended up short selling for like 700 grand. Okay, couldn't rent it out, so I ended up moving my mom into the house, and she lived in it for like 6 months, right? So it was one of those things where I was making the most amount of money I'd ever made in my life after leaving, Primerica to do this real estate thing. It was only a short period of time though before regulations and stuff's changed.
You talk about weeks, months, years?
About a year.
So you had a year of fun.
I had a year of
just making the money. Okay.
I think 400 or 500 grand that year.
That's crazy.
And a lot of it was, now that I knew how to do it, I could teach somebody else how to do it. Right. And you remember the guy, Matt, the guy that quit the Primerica thing, right?
Yeah.
So he had got into, after he left, not working with me.
The one that couldn't do the first sale. Yeah. Okay, got it.
He became a custom home builder.
Oh.
Okay, so he's building a custom home in Las Sendas. Okay. And this is right as the market is having these challenges, right, where everything is overinflated and nothing is really selling, and so it's easy for us to get in and creatively buy these properties because the sellers are in these situations. And so his custom home is about finished, and he can't find a buyer. Okay. And so I go to him and I'm like, hey, if you can't find something for it, if you're willing to do something creative, I can get rid of it for you. He's like, what do you mean? And I was like, well, you're probably, looking for X. We can get it to you for this, but we're going to have to finance $150,000 more than what, you're asking for it. And it will appraise that much. So I think he had like 250 of it, you know what I mean? Something like that. But what ended up happening is, his assignment, like once we closed, he was giving cash back to the buyer. Well, 50 of that cash back was mine.
Right. Yeah.
And so we're playing poker, right? And he finds out I made more money on that home than he did building it, which took 8 months to do it.
How many years later was that?
It was a couple years later in a house in Las Sendas, right? That I was, my mortgage on that house in Las Sendas at the time, because I'm making all this money, right? And I don't know what I'm doing. So I'm just trying to keep up with the Joneses, and I go buy this $1 million home in Las Sendas. I'm living by myself, right? And my mortgage is $12,500 a month, right? And I'm like, but every month we were able to make the check because we got all these things going. You know what I mean? Right. And that was bought creatively, where it was not a substitute. It was basically lease to own. So the 12.5 was actually going to the mortgage payment, and 2,500 was going to the guy that held it, right? And I was supposed to, in 6 months or a year, go ahead and finance it. Well, it didn't work because the market crashed.
Right.
So I'm just paying 12.5 for like 8 months for something that I don't ever end up buying.
Goodness.
You know what I mean? And just blowing the money. And me and my brother are staying in the house, just living it up as bachelors, right? And yeah, it was.
So when you look back at that year run, right? Obviously, there's highs, and then there's a really big low. Right. But what was the takeaway from that? Because obviously part of that is still with you. And I can see you still like the creativeness of it. So
one of the things you hear all the time in personal development is when you're a kid, you learn money patterns and money beliefs. Right. So money doesn't grow on trees. Right. Well, that's false. You know what I mean? Or there's not enough money at the end of I don't have enough money at the end of the paycheck. I can't afford that. And a lot of the personal development, I'm looking at your Rich Dad, Poor Dad book on the shelf, teaches you to change your thinking.
Right.
So in Primerica, I had to change my thinking to acquire this wealth. And And so my mindset allowed me to make that kind of money,
True.
right? But you got to be careful what you ask for, right? I was not ready emotionally to handle that type of success, and my mentor was gone, so I was doing it all on my own. I didn't really talk about this, but during that Primerica time, right, when I was 19 and started Primerica, I was dating my ex-wife. And when we got promoted to VP, we got married. I actually proposed to her live on EPN TV in front of 100,000 people.
Oh my God.
Right. And the relationship didn't work. We didn't have any kids. So we separated right before I had all this success. Right. So it was kind of like bittersweet to her. It's like struggled for
back.
8 years. And as soon as we separate, I make more money than I've ever made.
Right.
But I'm also single and I have no mentor.
I see.
Okay. Backing up to the story in Primerica, I remember about being in slacks and ties.
Right.
At the time, I remember Ace came to me and he's like, "Hey, I want to ask you something. I don't know how you feel about it, but you're going to be in homes where you're dealing with these people's finances. Do you think, how do you feel about taking your earrings out?" Okay. Now, in my ears right now are black diamond earrings.
Yeah,
okay?
yeah.
So it's kind of funny. It's like I remember at 20 years old taking my earrings out, saying, "Yeah, I can do that," and did not put them on until I was 29 years old. Because I didn't want that. You know what I mean? I realized that wasn't, my image was important. And so I wanted to look the part. So not only, my hair was always cut perfect. I took my earrings out, was in a shirt and tie most of my 20s.
Wow.
Married to my ex-wife. And then all of a sudden, relationship doesn't work. My mentor's gone. I go make $500,000. My earrings are back in. And now I want to go get a taste of the world. Right. And so I start participating in stuff that I had never been participating in before. During this real estate journey, while I was going through my divorce, I started dating a old flame from high school. And she was also in real estate. So we were business partners and dating. Okay. Father's a pastor. She wants to wait till we get married. I honor that. But also frustrated. Right. And I remember we're making all this money, traveling. We went to Florida for some convention to learn how to buy apartment complexes. And I'm like, "What's she doing here?"
That's great.
You know what I mean? But this is what I was trying to do. We also try to buy the Camelback the mansion on Kyrene and Ray from Cable Rosenberg back in the day. It's still there. It's owned by somebody else, but we're going to take that house down, build 10-acre lots, $1 million. And this was all in the process of planning, right? And everybody, we belonged to the Living Word Bible Church, big church. So everybody looked at us as this like powerful couple real estate. We even did a seminar called Kingdom Living Seminars, where we had Matt Menino, Kevin Zirk, I believe, what is his name? I can't remember. Basketball player for the Suns.
Nash.
No, not Nash. Cedric Ceballos. He was like a local business developer, so he came and spoke. Jordan Adler, a huge network marketer, came and spoke. Kevin Zirk came and spoke, and so we were just like these. People knew who we were in the community, but here was what was really going on. She wanted to wait till we got married, and I was recently single. Not wanting to wait.
Right.
But I honored that, right? And I was in love with her, and so we just kept moving forward. But now we needed to stop the physical stuff, because that's just going to lead to something. So now we're not even dating, but we're still business partners. And now I'm starting to feel a little bit of animosity, because we're going traveling and I'm paying for it, right? And before we met, she was living at her parents. Now she's living in Troon in $1 million house because of what we taught, right? And a lot of that was her own doing. I'm not taking credit for it, but we were just doing it together, and it felt like I was being taken advantage of. So there was some stress in that relationship, but it was also around me making a lot of money. So stress and money. We ended up going to California to meet with one of the executives for Meritage Homes. It happened to be a friend of hers husband, and we were going to get some mentorship from him. And while we're in California on a beach house, getting mentored by this guy, right? I got some business dealings back home. My phone dies. "Hey, babe, can I see your phone real quick? I got to call back home." Text comes through. Hey, babe, how's the trip? That's shocking to me, right? I don't know what's going on. We go to lunch or go to dinner, and the gal I was dating, she's not going to lie to me because of her nature, right? So she, or not least to my face, right? So I confronted her. I was like, hey, I just need to know what's going on. What's this? And it was her personal trainer, and they had been sleeping together.
Jeez.
And so the pain I felt, right, of even though I wasn't doing all the right things, it was this pain because there was this infatuation to this ideal power couple partnership, right? We didn't develop our relationship really strong enough to but just all, you're young and you're going through all this stuff. And so I told her, I was like, I'm jumping on a plane, I'm going home. And we shut down we shut down our limo business that we had together. I shut down the seminar business, and we stopped being real estate partners, right? And that was the beginning of the market crashing. So I had this huge high, and then an emotional, stressful situation with a relationship. Right. And then I know I'm going to lose it all, but I haven't lost it all yet. So I still got a couple $100,000 in the bank, right, but none of the regulations changing. So I can't keep doing what I'm doing. So I don't have the money to cover the $25,000 nut every month, right, because no more new money's coming in. Yep. And I probably waited too long to just let everything go. But I ended up foreclosing all the houses. I had 3 cars at the time. I had a 645 BMW that I couldn't put gas in. Jeez. Right? Because I could until the money was all gone. But during that whole time, as I'm losing it all, what do you do when you lose everything? What do you want to feel? Right? Some type of pleasure, right? And that led me to clubbing and that whole scene, drugs, everything, to the point to where I went. It was crazy because I went from partnering up with somebody to sell a multi-million-dollar home to Alicia Keys, right? Driving LeBron James around in a limo, having a seminar company where you got all these speakers doing it. And then within 6 months, losing all that, getting into a lifestyle that was not very positive, right? To the point to where I'm almost homeless, right? Like I could go back to my mom's house, but I've lost all my houses. Right. And now that my friends are all drug users, right, I'm just bouncing around to different places, trying to find myself, right? I got to the point to where I knew I had a problem and drove to California to go stay with my sister for like 2 months. Came back, got right back on it, right? Right. Never really had any legal troubles other than traffic tickets. And I'm in my mid 30s, and all of a sudden I get in trouble with the law because I get pulled over and I have drugs on me. Right. Oh, geez. And so I had to go spend some time. Right. I thought the 1.5 years that I was away would have fixed it. Right. Got out. The humbling thing is when you've made that kind of money, you can't go get a job and replace that.
So true.
Okay. So now you're like, it's super humbling to go start anywhere. And I didn't have that in me. So I tried to do other stuff, and those things are not good. Right. And doing all those things during that time, right, I ended up right back into the same situation, ended up back there, right? In trying to get my life back together, I met my wife now, and she met me after the fact. Wow. So she never saw the big income. She never saw the cars and all that stuff. She knows about it. Right. She met me actually while I was doing those things, but we didn't date until after I had lost everything, right? And we end up having our first son, John, and then Kylie shortly after. She has a son, Lucas. So the 3 of us, as a family, right, start building and trying to do different things. I ended up starting a pool service business, something simple. But again, like when I'm cleaning someone's pool and they're coming out and they're telling me what to do, in the back of my mind, I'm like, you have no idea who I am, right? Yeah. So it was this was so hard. It's a struggle, yeah. Right? And it was so easy to just disappear from that pain that I felt like as a loser because I've been there. Right. And what's worse is having it and having it taken away. Yeah.
That lesson in itself. Most people in their entire life they spend to make that kind of money, and then when they get it, they're too old to even do anything. Right? You had the money at an age where you can be young and do everything. Well, the one thing that really sticks out to me is when you were making the money, you were driving LeBron James, which is crazy, and you sold a house to Alicia Keys. The drugs and everything weren't there. it's when the downfall
Yeah.
happened.
It happened right after that. And, I remember like one of the cool stories. I remember bringing my brother meeting him at lunch. And I think I made like 80 grand that last month. And I came to him and I'm like, hey, how are things going? He's like, oh, blah, 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 talking about his house and some debt. I'm like, how much credit card debt you have? It's like 25 grand. I'm like, all right, cool. Kept talking to him. My bank was next door. So I told him, I'm going to go to the restroom real quick. Went inside the bank, pulled out 25 grand.
Come
I
on.
said, go pay that off.
No way.
Right. Because I didn't know what to, you know what I mean? Like I was just excited to do it, but you don't have anybody to share that with. None of my friends even believed that I was making that kind of money. Right.
But that shows who you are, right?
Right.
The reason why I wanted to bring that up is because when money brings out the person that you really are, right? And instead of getting into the drugs and clubbing when the money was going and you're making all this money, it came on the downfall.
It came on the
which
downfall.
shows who you are, right? The money didn't bring you to the drugs and stuff.
No.
You were giving, you were trying to help people. It's the downfall, the pain that you went through that brought you, which is understandable, right? We all
and that's what leads to addictions, right? Is when
Right.
you're covering up that pain. I think I've been diagnosed with attention deficit disorder, and I think high school football was my medicine, and then Primerica for 8 years was my medicine.
Right. Yeah, that makes sense.
Because I was so focused.
Go. Yeah,
right.
100%.
I remember when I was finally in this thing where I'm cleaning pools and I'm clean at the time. I'm not using anything, and I'm leaving the door open, or I'm leaving the water, the little chlorine thing on top, and not putting the tap in. And the customers are calling like, "Hey, what's going on?" Because my mind, like this was such a mundane thing. My brain was someplace else trying to figure out the next way I'm going to make $1 million. Right.
Right.
And so those are, there's no excuses for it, but those are some of the reasons why, like, I just couldn't get my act together, if you will. Right. After I had my daughter and I realized like, this is enough, right? I'm in my 40s now. I can't be doing all this stuff. Right. And I lapse, and because of my back history, right, I get caught with a very small amount, and they want to throw the book at me. I get an attorney, pay him $5,000. I literally have like less than $10 worth of substances on me, but because of the prior record, they want to put me away for 10 years.
Oh my gosh.
And my daughter's about to be born, right? And so I spent a bunch of money on an attorney, try to fight it, end up getting it plead down to 5, end up only doing like 2.5. But that 2.5 was enough, right? So when during that time, my wife and my kids visit every month, right? I feel bad for her because she's, she saw the potential in me, but then shortly into our relationship, I'm in prison. But she stood by my side. I knew after I had some clarity of 6 months, and all that out of my system, I made a decision. It's like, okay, that's done. Right. And it wasn't AA. It wasn't God, really. I was just tired. I'm like, I can't do that anymore. Right. And being in there, I ended up becoming a recovery support specialist. So I was, for the 3 years I was, 2.5 years I was in there, my job was actually learning about substance abuse and teaching it to the other inmates that were having way harder challenges than I, right? People that came from, there was one guy in the room that literally cut his arm off. You know what I mean? Because like just craziest stories you would ever hear, right?
Yeah.
Of these people that are dealing with addiction, And so as I was in, I studied for that. My intentions were, when I got out, was to go into behavioral health and try to be of service to others that have gone through what I went through. Right. So I get out and I start applying all these different places to get a job in recovery support. And unfortunately, because of probation, all of them said, hey, we can't hire you right now. You have to be off paper for a certain amount of time. And I didn't have any connections in the industry, so I couldn't get in, because there's some companies that'll make some exceptions, but I didn't have any contacts. Right. Ironically, one of the gals that I used to get high with was sober now after when I got out. Right. And I could have never guessed in a million years she would have gotten sober. But she was sober and doing well and successful. And she reached out to me and said, hey, how's it going? I see that you're out. Have you found any work yet? And I told her what I was trying to do with behavioral health and was having a struggle with it. And she said, hey, I got something. I don't know if you'd be open to it, but they'll hire you and you can get started right away and then figure things out. Desperate, right?
Right, yeah.
I go and interview with a roofing company to get on the phone and make appointments.
Wow.
um, I remember sitting in the call center room, and I didn't know that this was a recovery place, right? So that everybody there was in recovery. I'm glad that they hired me with my background, but I didn't know that that was what the phone room was. And I remember sitting down the first day, and the gal next to me, so like, what did you use to get high off of? I was like,
What did you just
what
get
did
into?
you just say?
Yeah.
Right. And then I shortly realized, okay, this is a second chance center type place, right?
Right.
Within a week, I was the top sales guy.
Of course.
Within a few months, I was the manager, right? And took over the phone room and got the eyes, the attention of the ownership that, hey, we got somebody that, may have had some challenges in life, but had prior to that had some success and got some skills. And I think they tried to then recruit me over to go work for the solar company. And it took 3 or 4 attempts because I was buying a house now. And I was so proud of that. Like I had gotten the job and
should be.
I got a $15 an hour job. And within a year I was making almost 6 figures.
Right.
Which was just impressive to me. I was like, man, how did I, and then my wife started saying, like, okay, hey, I didn't marry some scum, some dirtbag.
Right.
But the way I looked at it was like, I just need an opportunity. Right. And so the opportunity was given to me. And as I started building these relationships with people sober now and with the right mindset, I'm able to still go back to all the stuff that I had learned. Right. Matter of fact, the entire time I was down, the little group of people that were meeting with me were reading Rich Dad Poor Dad, and we're talking. And some of these guys sell solar for me now.
That's awesome.
Right.
Yeah.
There's like 3 or 4 of them that I've now employed to go sell solar for my org that are all from the same little pod.
Crazy.
You know what I mean?
So take me a little bit. There's a name that popped up a few times and I want to talk about it, but Sarah, right? What brings me to tears, like the story, like there's so much to you and your relationship with her. How much of a factor has she played from that point of, you
she saved me. Yeah. Okay. She, without her, I don't know if I would have been able to pull myself out of the issues that I had gotten into. But her attitude towards it, obviously she loved me, I love her, and she could look through all those things and realize that was just an issue that we had to attack, and that once we fixed it, things would be good. And I think she had a little bit more belief that once we fixed it, things would be good than I did, because I didn't know how to get out of it. Right. And I had kept making the same mistakes. But when, I think while I was down and I saw the consistency and I started leaving the, because, the anxiety that every man has that goes through something like that, if they're married, is what is she doing when I'm not there? Right. And when, because of the consistency, letters after letters, phone calls every day, coming and visiting, driving all the way to Yuma. Right. I was like, man, this woman is doing everything that I could ever ask for. And so it was easy for me to say, okay, hey, I'm never going to put her through this again. Right. But I still didn't know exactly what I was going to do, And so when I got out, I had a rude awakening of it was a little harder than I thought it was going to be to go find something to excel at.
Right.
And then it took about 6 months before I got that opportunity.
Oh, wow.
You know what I mean? So I was just
6 months. Is it's not like crazy long, right? But it is a long amount of time.
And when I finally found that, I was like, oh, okay, this will, it's a shot, right? Because they didn't care about my background. And then I started seeing all the project managers that are doing super well. And I thought about getting into roofing, but it was also everybody in that came from the same thing. So it was like one story after story after story after story. I'm like, oh, there's a bunch of people that have gone through worse than me and have gone on to success. The guy that was running the company, Tyler, he tells his story about being, homeless in the parking lot of the Circle K that's across the street from his multi-million-dollar office. So when you hear those stories, you're like, okay, I found a home. I can excel here, and it won't be, it'll be a big deal, but not a big deal, right? It's there's consistency and people changing their life. And here's a environment where you see a bunch of it.
Yeah.
Fortunately, you also see people that almost get there. And when they almost get there and then something happens, it keeps you in check, right? We had a $600,000-$700,000 earner that had gotten sober, got all the success, lapsed once, overdose, dead.
tell me, I don't know the world too much. I know it in the ways of not drugs, but other things that I was addicted to growing up. But tell me the day in, day out, right? Is there always in the back of your mind, like, is there a chance that I can go back to that? Or is it in your mind now, like, no way, there's absolutely no way?
There's absolutely no way, but it's because things have changed. You know what I mean? You see so much when you're incarcerated with the stuff that's out there. Drugs are dangerous today because you don't know what's in it.
Right.
And so there's part of it's, even if I got so down on my luck to where I was in an environment where I could possibly, use the drug of choice, I'm afraid of it. So,
Right.
there's that factor.
Right.
But the desire is never really there, right? You know from experience from what addictions can do, right? And they obsess you, right? And there are still challenges I have, of course, right, with caffeine, right?
Right. Yeah,
what I
we're
mean? With
addicted to
eating,
something.
right?
Yes, exactly.
I'm addicted to pleasure, right? So a lot of the things that were around that was trying to get that dopamine rush,
Right.
and you just have to find other ways to do it, and when you start getting that balance, and your brain really has to heal. And so a lot of it was my brain healing to where I didn't, wasn't obsessed with needing that dopamine rush. You know what I mean?
It's powerful to understand. It's more scientific than anything else.
There was a good book or seminar thing that we watched while we was in there called Unwoven, Pleasure Unwoven. So for the listeners out there, if they need a good series or documentary on how that the brain works,
Right.
I had to watch that 5, 6, 7 times with my classes, and it was a really good way of explaining what's going on in the brain.
Right.
Basically, it has to do with survival mode, and so when you overload your brain with dopamine over and over and over again, it becomes, that's the survival mode, right? So what happens is when you are down and you need to survive, the first thing that comes to mind is, how do I get the dopamine pleasure? And if you've now started using a substance that gets it quickly, that's your brain's going to go right to that,
Right.
And it's trying to keep you running,
Right.
You know what I mean? Yeah. And so it's the old part of our brain that does that,
Right.
And with time, you can get that brain to heal by remapping, a lot of the different things, by changing your behavior,
Yeah.
and letting the peaks come down, right? And so I was able to do that while I was there, and that was just a matter of, can I maintain it while I'm out? And when I saw the opportunity with Mission Restoration in their foam room, the guy that was running it used to do the job I wanted. So he was running the phone room, but his previous job was he ran a facility, and he was telling me about all the politics in it and all the issues, and he needed to get away from it to go do something completely different, just working with the same kids, same people, So when he was telling me all that, I was like, okay, that's why, Janie said to be here, because this is the right environment for me to excel at. And I think it played a huge part in, I had to, rather than thinking about what might happen, because you got to play the story. They tell you, play the story out. Like, if you do that, what's going to happen, right?
Right.
Well, I didn't have to play the story out for myself very often, because I would see it, and I would see somebody all of a sudden get successful, and then they're right back in there.
That's
right?
the best deterrent to see it actually happen.
Yeah. And it was happening to, unfortunately, there was people that came out, got involved with me so that they can start doing roofing or solar. And unfortunately couldn't handle being out here and got in laps and went right back.
Right.
You know what I mean? And so it was like, oh, wow, that's it's not very like, I could go back very easily. If I was to lapse right now and couldn't handle it, within 3 months, I'd probably be back in prison. Because it just takes you.
Just know.
You know what I mean? So it was easy to be like, okay, I'm done with that. Right. Now, that doesn't mean all of a sudden you're going to have success.
Right. Of course.
You still got to go grind and do all those things that you know how to do, and believe that you can make it. Right.
Well, you've faced these challenges. You've faced multiple challenges in life. And I didn't expect this much of a background, history, and story. You have a lot to you. And I think the biggest thing is you have more experience than anyone that's been on the podcast, right? A lot of the guys
life experience,
right? And to you, I guess I want to ask you this real quick. What is success? Now you've made the money, right? And then you've been through a lot of the lows. And I have here amazing family, man. You love your kids. Most of your pictures on Instagram are you and your family, taking them on vacation. So what is your, now going through life, having money, losing the money, all this, what is true success to you?
So there's still some, when you preach for the years that I have on entrepreneurship and telling people that you don't want someone's thumb on you and you don't want them to tell you what to do, have your own freedom so that you can make your own money. You're never going to be successful unless you're doing your own thing. That's ingrained in me. I've network marketing for 10 years, right?
Yeah.
So I found myself in a particular situation where the last 5 years, I'm an employee, you know what I mean? And that's not something I'd ever done. I hadn't had a job. I hadn't worked for anybody my entire,
So true. Yeah.
you know what I mean? I was always self-employed. So now, because of given an opportunity and because of the skill set, I've been able to excel into a position of an executive for a company that's, doing well. But my role as the executive is to work with entrepreneurs.
Right. Right.
So
So
I'm
you're
preaching the same
you're
thing.
staring at it in the face every day.
Yes. And my owner ever watches this, he knows it when you have that cushion and you have that security, because I have a family, that's good. But if you're dealing with guys that you're like complaining about their $30,000 commission check, and you're the one teaching them how to do it and correcting all their mistakes,
Right. Yeah.
before you know it, you're like, well, I should be doing some of that, right?
Yeah.
So thankfully, I've been given the opportunity to dabble in that as well, which he's allowed. So I sell, right?
Yeah.
And I sell specifically in my community. That's my niche. Is I just go sell to my neighbors, because that way, if I see you in the grocery store, I
Easy
did it
sale.
right.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? I'm on
100%.
a real low comp on those so that they can be happy, and it's a good,
I have a word here. It's you're either an entrepreneur, right? And you know the word an intrapreneur, right? And that's how I see you at this current stage, right? Yeah, it's not exactly where you want to be, but even though you're working under an umbrella, you still operate as your own entity within some confines of rules and how to run the business.
Yeah,
but it's
and
still your own.
In full disclosure, I have the income stream that I have as the executive. That's my salary and bonuses, and then I have my separate solar sales org, which is just me selling, because I can't recruit for those because of my job, but I can sell.
Yeah.
Right. And then in that experience, I learned that, hey, there's some other opportunities out there, right? And I know a lot of good people. I know there's one guy that's really good at call centers. Should probably introduce him to some people, right? I know this other guy that's running somebody else's org. I should probably try to work with him, right? And all these connections. I met a gentleman that we brought on board to my installer that also had similar connections, and the two of us been able to work together on other projects that are outside the scope of what we do. And commercial, for example, is not something that my installer does. So we've done the commercial stuff outside of it, and it's starting to turn into some awesome opportunity, right? So the future for me, I don't know what it's going to look like. Obviously,
I was just about to ask you this. Yeah.
I have very, my wife asked me the other day, she's like, what's your goal next year? I was like, $500,000, right? Which sounds crazy to go from do all the stuff that I've done to get out to barely, have to start a job at $15 an hour. And then the first couple of years, you're not really doing well. And then you're into your fifth year.
Yeah.
And now your income is starting to it's so crazy. You know how many people struggle to try to make six figures?
Right.
Right. And I'm, between the salary and the other sales, it's over 200,000, and I'm barely 4 or 5 years out of prison.
Right.
Now there's people that have done it way faster than me. Right. But I have every intentions of, continuing that path. And all the money does at that point with all that experiences means you can keep it this time.
Yeah.
Start making better decisions with it. And
most guys would make that money. Okay. Most guys would make that money, lose it all. And I don't want to say most guys, but there are a good amount of guys that would end up giving up, right? Settling for something that they don't want.
Right.
But they just coast for the rest of their life. And you're somebody that continues to fight. I mean, you were incarcerated over a stupid amount of drugs. And that in itself would get someone to be mad at the world.
Right.
Instead, you're incarcerated, then helping people, right? What is that? Why do you continue to keep fighting and helping people? Even when you don't benefit from it.
I think what I probably can test that to is you have to make a choice in life on when you believe in the concept of victor victim type mentality, right? I have to take responsibility for, like, I know I created all this. You know what I mean? Like my behavior, my thinking, mainly my thinking is what, whatever you think about comes about. And so I know the answer to getting out of all this stuff is to focus on helping enough people get what they want, right? Which is what I learned in Primerica. And if I can help enough people excel and get what they want, and that's why I'm so quick to put people together, right? Because I just have a knowing that working these connections and helping other people get what they want, helping them be successful, you're going to be taken care of, right? And I've built a bunch of relationships where people know that, hey, if he might know somebody, so they'll reach out to me, right?
Yes.
Or he might know how to navigate this. So these connections that I've made over the years is what the reason why I have this attitude of just trying to win is the other attitude is losing. You know what I mean? Like when you wake up in the morning and you're faced with all the different challenges that are out there, right? If you don't have, the world's tough, right? There's so many distractions out there with, the apps and life and politics. And I mean, there's just a million different things out there. And so the only way I feel that you're going to make it is if you really have a game plan of what you want, focus on that, and just keep working towards it, right? And it's not always going to go your way. How you respond to it when it doesn't go your way is your character, right? And if you refuse to give up, guess what happens? You win, right? Like that. No, and this is network marketing. Really, what they teach you is as long as you don't quit, statistically, you always win. Because it's just a matter of time before whatever you're doing works. Matter of fact, all you're doing is figuring out what doesn't work.
It's true. That's very true. Yeah, I didn't think about that. Yeah.
And eventually, the stuff that doesn't work you're gonna find the stuff that does, right? Yeah. And if you're confident that eventually you're gonna win, then you're not gonna give up. And I was brainwashed, if you will, enough to see enough people that, I mean, their stories are crazy. 10 years they were broke, they were doing all this stuff, and then they finally win, and all of a sudden their life is just amazing. And that's the common story we hear from the success stories. I love your podcast in the sense that you're talking to them before they get to that pinnacle peak, right? But you can look back 10 years from now on every guest on your podcast, and you're going to see that 99% of those people are winners because of their attitudes. That's why they're on here, and they're going to win eventually, right? What it looks like is going to be so different.
Yeah, and I'm so glad that you're here now, because I expect it for you, like for whatever it's worth. I know you'll get there. And I think what I imagined for you to get there is beyond the money. I think that, opportunity is always brought to you. And whenever it doesn't work out for you, you give it to others, right? I believe that there's a point where the opportunity is going to be working for you, and it's all opportunities that come to you, right? It's going to be effortless. You've been working and striving and fighting for so many years that it'll turn over. It'll be effortless because you've been giving for so long, right? And one, I hope that for you. And then two, what could you say to the person in this seat? One, your life experience is more valuable than the money you're going to make, right? The millions of dollars is going to be in your bank account in the next year, possibly, because you never know. In my opinion, your experience of life, the highs and lows, is worth way more than any of that. The story that you just told can change someone's life. The person, before they make the fall and get into the dark world, they can hear your story. Right. And your story is more powerful than all that. So what could you say to that guy that maybe is making all the money and doesn't know what to do with it? Because you're talking about mentors. You're like, I had a mentor, he left, and I didn't know what to do, right? What can you do, or what can you say to those guys?
Well, there's a Clemmer and Associates. That was one of the other speakers at one of the seminars that we did, Brian Clemmer. I went to a seminar of his one time, and I remember it was in a big room. And he had this task for us, right? And it was, he took the room, emptied the room, and had everybody go line up on one side of the room. And then he had a whiteboard. And he wrote on the whiteboard, he wrote intentions plus mechanism equals results. Whatever you intend to do, you then have a mechanism to get there, and then you have the result. And what he wrote that on the board, and then he's like, oh, here's the task for the day. Everybody on the right side You're going to go one at a time. There's 100 people in the room. And the first person, you just have to get to the other side of the room. And you can do it however you like. The second person can do it however they like. They just can't copy the way that the first person did, right? And so you can see by the time you get to 5, 6, 7, 8 people, we're skipping, we're jumping, we're rolling, we're hopping. The mechanisms are indefinite. And he went up to the room and he took the marker and he crossed off mechanism. Intentions equal results. If you're not sharp on your intentions of what you really, really want, and you're not constantly thinking about what you really, really want, right, the mechanism will never show up. But if you just focus on, and this is why, you know, writing your goals down, the simplest thing that you can do, right? I got to share with you about this Ideal company that I just met. They have a app that basically teaches, it's the formula, not the how-to, because you already know that, but it's the discipline to do the daily things, right? So that's ingrained in me. And I just, when I see people that are missing the mark or they're struggling, it's like, it's easy to find out why, is their focus is not, their dream is not big enough, right? And they're not really thinking about it a lot. Versus you get that kid that's just obsessed with something, the gamer, the athlete. What do they eventually get? Success.
Yeah.
Because they're obsessed with it, right? I just started listening to this tape on poker, right? Because I play a little bit, but I'm not really good. And I was like, it was a little audio book on my way home. I'm like, you realize if I just kept listening to this over and over again, like I would become a pro, right?
Yeah.
And that's in anything. Like whatever you want to do, the stuff is out there to teach you how to do it. You gotta one, believe that you can. So you gotta work on your belief system. Make the intention of how, like, this is what I want, and then don't worry about the mechanism. Try everything, right? If that didn't work, that just means that didn't work.
Right.
Something else will, right? And if you getting back to the upper, if you don't give up doing that, would it be nicer to get there faster?
Sure.
And this is where the mentorship helps. Now, not everybody. I remember if I would have went back to when I first was being mentored by Ace and listened to everything he actually said for me to do, I probably wouldn't be here because financially I'd be already done, right? He was teaching me stuff back then that I didn't implement, right? Because I was too stubborn. I had to go learn it my own way. You know, it's hard to get people to understand this, but if people just knew that, look, somebody has already done it. Don't try to reinvent the wheel, right? Success leaves clues, right? Find somebody that's doing what it is that you want to accomplish and just copy them.
Dumb it down. Make it simple.
Make it simple. Maybe you'll have your own flavor of it, right? This podcast venture that you're doing is going to be different than others, but you know the formula.
Right.
You know what I mean?
Right.
And so success to me is not something that is definitely like is difficult to attain, but there's a formula to it, right? And what happens is you see a bunch of people's like, I can't make it. It's like, oh, it's because you're not putting all the necessary little ingredients in it, right? And sometimes it's a mentor to come and tell you, hey, you're missing this piece, right? If you're trying to be successful and you're not trying to grow every day by personally developing, that's one of the ingredients. And you can tell by just interviewing a bunch of people, right? You think about Think and Grow Rich. He interviewed all those people. Yeah. And what did he find? They all have to see it first. It's the thought, right? Yep. I remember being a kid in high school bench pressing, and that concept of knowing that I would visualize me pressing it before I would do it, right? I didn't know like how powerful that was until later in life, but that's how you do it. You got to see yourself doing it first, right? And you'll hear of stories of like, there's a defensive back in the league in an NFL that he does this, and he has a strange amount of picked up fumbles and interceptions. It's because like he just almost like the universe is folding to his right. desire, right? And you hear all these crazy stories about it happening quick, right? For some people. If you've been around that part of personal development, you've known of situations where you've thought of something, all of a sudden they're calling you, right? My question to people is, do you believe that? Do you believe that's real, right? Or do you think that's just a coincidence? As soon as you know that, no, that there's probably some truth to it, even if you can't explain it, then exploit it. So if you know if you hold a thought long enough on something that you're going to obtain it, what are you doing? Right? You should be holding on to what you want on a regular basis. And I'm guilty of it. I know you're guilty of it. We don't do it every day like we should.
Right.
If we did, results would go faster, right? If we allowed a mentor to kind of guide us through the maze, you're going to get there faster. If you get out of your own way, you're going to get there faster. If your beliefs are higher, you're going to get there faster. But we're people, and all those different things are what holds somebody back from getting from point A to point B. Slow down, right? Think about where the mistakes are being made and just start filling those spots. And so 2025 for me is really about that, because there's a bunch of spots that are not consistent, right? And whether it be the gym or eating, right, to being consistent with pushing the envelope forward on the different ventures that you're involved in. For me, it's about getting back to the basics and going and closing those gaps, right, of things that I'm not necessarily doing well right now.
Right.
But yeah, I love being an entrepreneur just for it's almost like a game, you know what I mean? And
Course, yeah.
Just all the different things. We're only here for a flicker, right? And so I'm enjoying it, you know what I mean? And I'm looking forward to being, looking back and being on a different level and saying, wow, you believed it, but did you really believe it, right? And then once you get that success and you can see it, you're like, man, that's crazy. You know what I mean? And think about it. I'm sitting in my cubicle in prison, right? And thinking about what's going to happen when I get out. And even though I'm nowhere near where I want to be, right? I know a lot of people that have left and are nowhere near where I'm at. You know what I mean? And I can test that to just doing the daily little things and having that belief system that you can do it, right? And we're just getting started.
I love beautifully
you know what I mean?
said.
Like,
yeah, it's very true.
It's the beginning stages, right? And if you have that attitude of wherever you're at, you know what I mean? Because you have goals that are bigger than where you're at right now. That's exciting. You're either growing or you're dying.
Love it.
And I think when people are struggling or they're stuck or they're comfortable, they need to take that hard look in the mirror and realize, like, hey, if I don't do something different today, tomorrow's going to be the same way, right? And once you get started making these changes, right, to your life, you get the bug and you become part of the club. And you get invited to podcasts, right? And you have friends that are on different levels, you know what I mean? And you start changing your circle of people, right? There's people out there right now that maybe this is the beginning of them getting into personal development and trying to get better. Let's take an inventory of who you hang out with. You know what I mean? If they're not on the same wavelength, you gotta change your circle, right? You're only going to be as wealthy as the people that you're around. Go find some people that are doing what you want and pick their brains and, invite yourself to go work out, whatever you got to do, you know what I mean? So that you can be around the people that are having success, because they'll, success leaves clues. And there's a bunch of people that have had tons more success in a shorter period of time than me, right? But everybody has their own journey, and I'm just glad to be part of the conversation and being around those people, right? And I'm impressed with a lot of the people that are around me, which is good. If you're not impressed with the people around you, you need to get around different people,
right?
You know what I mean? And I have a circle of friends and associates that are just, you know what I mean? They're going after it, right? And so
it keeps you driven.
Keeps me driven.
Yeah. Well, one, I think you're a great success already. I know that monetarily you're after the bigger money, but being, great husband, a father, all those things, I think you've achieved a lot of success, right, in your own rights, coming from where you just came from, right? So I appreciate you coming in. I want to tie us all in with the rapid fire round, the questions that I don't want you to think about it. I just want you to answer right off the hip.
Sounds perfect.
And everybody answers the same questions. All right, you ready? All right. Are you a pizza guy or spaghetti guy?
Ooh.
You're thinking too much.
No, so pizza guy. Right?
Okay, all right. You're a pizza guy.
Mhm.
Is that the family dinner mostly pizza?
No, just answering quickly. If I have a choice between pizza and spaghetti, I'm gonna eat
That's
pizza.
funny.
Right? I do like spaghetti,
Yeah.
but if you gave me the option, I'm probably taking the pizza.
Okay. Coke or Pepsi?
Coke.
Okay. Walk on the beach or early morning hike?
Walk on the beach.
Oh, okay. All right. I like that.
like
Would you
mornings.
take $1 million upfront one time or $15,000 a month for the rest of your life?
Today I would say $15,000 a month for the rest of my life. Right? There's I don't want to curse on here, but there's an old clip where they talk about paying your house off, and he's talking about like FU money.
Right.
Right.
Yeah.
Once you get to this point, nobody can tell you anything.
Yeah.
If you got 15 grand a month, you can't really mess that up.
That's true.
Right. So there's some just
Right.
that relief of pressure, right?
Yeah.
Because we're going to be fine no matter what.
Yeah.
$1 million, you can make a mistake.
That's wise. That's the wisdom I'm talking about. That's really powerful.
Because you take that money and you go try whatever you're going to try, or you try to make it last, and you could potentially mess that up.
Right.
You know, and even if you're getting a 10% return, that's less than
The 15.
the 15. So
You're in that. That's I don't know. That's really great. You're the first person to really in depth like explain the two. That's great. Football or basketball? I'm curious on this one.
Football.
Okay, interesting. Stocks or crypto?
That's a tough one.
I didn't put real estate in there.
I don't have enough knowledge of like I mean obviously I had a securities license and stuff, so I knew long term or short term.
It don't matter. What do you really gravitate towards if you had to choose to invest in the rest of your life?
Right now, still stock.
Okay.
Just being honest, I know there's huge opportunities over there, but it from being when you've been around a long time and you know what's has been
Right.
The track record still
Fair enough. Lamborghini or Ferrari?
Lamborghini.
You're the first.
Really?
Yeah, everyone said Ferrari. Why Lamborghini?
When I was coming up in network marketing, I was working with a guy who had a Lamborghini, and I remember it was a bright orange Lamborghini, and I was a part-time sales rep, but I was one of his top guys, and I still had a part-time job as a bouncer at a bar, and every once in a while he'd take me to work.
Oh, that's cool.
And it was just the song bumping in, getting on my best friend's Lambo.
Yeah.
But yeah.
I love that. Well, you'll definitely get one of those one day. And then if you could have any superpower in the world, what would it be?
I think if you could read someone's mind, right? I think if you knew what their intentions were, you would avoid so much heartache. Like if somebody had a sign like right on their forehead that says exactly what their intentions is, you'd be like this, and then you could just move on.
Yeah.
Right? Instead of wasting your so much time with certain things, with certain people, because their intentions for you is different.
Right.
And you would also recognize when your thoughts and their thoughts are in alignment, so that you can invest in those types of opportunities. So, as a superpower, like
reading people's minds.
Reading people's minds, like that's an art that can be learned, right?
Right.
But I think that would be my superpower.
I like that. That's the sales tactic too.
Because then you can get whatever you want.
Yeah, exactly. Yes.
If I could read your mind, I could pretty much get whatever I want.
Conversation.
Right.
Yes, I agreed. I like that. You're the first to say that. Well, any last final words? One, I've enjoyed this sincerely. It's been really fun, and then learning, and I've learned a lot from you just through this conversation. But any last final words to that person listening? Maybe 5 years from now, maybe you can say something to your future self, right? Mm-hmm. So what do you want to say to people that are listening? And then what would you say to yourself in the future?
For the people that are listening, I would say, whether I've said anything at all that might have triggered anything in you or not, this platform that Meshach is putting together I think of it as almost like chicken soup for the soul, right? It's a bunch of stories of people that could potentially change your life. And so if it wasn't on this one, keep listening, because it's only a matter of time. Because I've had spoken in large groups where someone's come up to me in the past and said, "Hey man, what you said was like, and changed my life." I'm like, we say the same thing. Every speaker says the same thing,
right? But
maybe the way I said it or whatever, they connect it. So people move people, right? And if you've gotten this far and you're listening, right, maybe I'm moving in some kind of way, but keep listening to a podcast like this, because it's going to help you grow. And you couldn't be a better person to put this on, right? I really think this is going to be fun. It was fun for me, and I love it, and I appreciate you having me on here. But I think you're going to have a lot of benefit from it, right? Because every time you do one of these, you're learning about. You get put that arrow in your quiver that you can use next time.
Yes.
And the connections that you make from it, it's definitely going to be worth it. So
It's true. What about Maxie in 5 years? What could you say to him?
Proud of you, right? Regardless, because if I'm looking back 5 years, I'm not necessarily looking at where I'm going to be at 5 years from now. It's the fact that I'm not where I could have been. Right. And I don't even need to know what that looks like 5 years from now. I already know I'm going to be in a better situation.
It's that belief. Yeah.
Than I was today. Right. Because of all the things that we've talked about. Right. And I will definitely be proud of that person. Right. And that's cool to feel, because that's almost like saying to yourself, you're not going to mess up. You're not going to get sidetracked and it's all going to fall apart. Absolutely. That is an impossibility.
Wow.
Because my belief is so strong that good things are going to happen, because I keep putting myself around good people, and I keep doing the best I can to do the right things, right? And so there's this confidence that I'm going to be okay.
I love that.
Sometimes it's scary because, my driving, I'm not worried. I don't, bad things don't. I want to say bad things don't happen to me, and then all of a sudden bad things happen to me. But my belief is that bad things happen to people that are thinking about bad things. I don't think about those things.
Right.
So if I'm always focused on the positive, I'm always focused on the next step. I'm always focused on, that didn't work out, but I don't dwell on it and move forward.
Right.
5 years from now, what's going to happen? You know what I mean? I'm going to be super proud of that guy.
Yeah.
Right. So
I love that. Yeah. The intangibles in life are the hardest things to control. Things that you can't physically do, and you've got that down now. Like your thought life is the hardest thing, in my opinion. I struggle with my thought life to stay focused and to keep going. I love that. That's like your confidence in the next 5 years. Like, nothing, right? That's really powerful. That's my takeaway from this conversation, is your belief and forwardness about that.
And that doesn't mean everything's smooth, right?
Right.
I'm still not consistently in the gym like I need to be.
Right.
But I also know I'm not going to let myself get to a point.
See, that's powerful.
You know what I mean? Like
right.
So it's like, I just know that in order to win in life, you've got to make all these sacrifices and decisions. And sometimes you do it quicker for certain things than others. Depends on how bad the pain is.
Right.
I put on some weight from the, holidays and whatnot.
Yeah.
And I'm not where I want to be right now.
Right.
But I know, even if I'm not in there tomorrow, right, which I intend to be, but my goals won't allow me to go backwards.
That's powerful.
So
I love that. Well, thank you. I know you got your phone's going off. You got a lot to do. Guys, if you have any questions for him, you can follow him on Instagram. And then if you're listening to the podcast, you can click on my Instagram. You can go to his Instagram and follow him. So, John, thank you. Appreciate it.
Thank you.
Thank you.